So even though I already did a pickups video of sorts for December by doing my winter sale pickups video a couple of weeks back, there were a few games that I grabbed before the winter sale happened, like right at the end of November or right at the beginning of December, that were either games that I played full retail for, or they were games that I got as part of the Humble Bundle that I get each month, and I really didn't want to leave them out, so I thought I would go over them here today. And the thing that really excited me about these games in particular is that I have zero familiarity with any of the games on this list. They are entirely new to me. I've not played them in any form before, so all of this was just kind of new for me to explore, and based on everything that I'd seen from the trailers for these games, they look like a whole lot of fun. So all that being said, let's just go ahead and jump into the first one on this list, and that would be Klonoa Fantasy Reverie. And for starters, I know very little about Klonoa as a character or as a series or anything like that. The only thing that I really know is that some people swear by it and say it's a really great platformer, mostly friends that I have in the retro community, and I know that some of those earlier titles go for just crazy amounts of money on eBay. I think I was looking at, the original Klonoa on PS1 from '97, I think goes for something like $200 or $300, which is just bonkers. But thankfully, Namco remastered the first two games into this single game called Klonoa Fantasy Reverie series. And honestly, I don't think you can fault me for being confused here, because the series has just been all over the place. And I had to piece this together through research that the original Klonoa Door to Phantomile came out on the PS1 in 1997, and then its sequel came out on the PS2 in 2001, but then the first title, Klonoa Door to Phantomile, was remade on the Wii in 2008. And now Klonoa Fantasy Reverie series has been remastered as both of the original games in the collection that we're talking about now. And then on top of that, apparently you've also got a few Game Boy Advance games that came out in the Klonoa series, so I'm not going to bother trying to piece that together today. I'll probably explore those games at another point, but yeah, the point is, I knew nothing about Klonoa going into this, and somehow I feel like I know even less having researched it, but for now, just know that it's a 2.5D side-scrolling platformer that centers around the titular Klonoa. Set in Phantomile, a land fueled by dreams people have at night, where Klonoa himself has had a dream about an airship crashing into a nearby mountain. And then, mysteriously enough, in Klonoa's waking world, an airship does end up crashing into a nearby mountain. And that's where the adventure begins, where Klonoa and his ring spirit friend called Hupao, I think I'm saying that correctly, take off to investigate. I've only played a little bit so far, but I'm a sucker for colorful 2.5D platformers anyways, and it's already clear that it's a very unique game. My first instinct was to start jumping on enemies, but you don't really do that in Klonoa that I've seen so far. Rather, you can fire off air bullets and sort of grab enemies and then toss them into stuff, or you can use them to activate a double jump to navigate its environments. And those environments feel really unique, not just because they're cartoony and all, but because the way branching paths snake back into each other as you go off the beaten path feels very Dark Souls to me. I mean, obviously it's not sporting Bloodborne levels of difficulty here or anything, I just thought that was really interesting. So yeah, it's $39.99 for this Klonoa combo of the first two games remastered, so if you're a fan of games like Super Mario 3D Land, or if, like me, you also jumped into Pac-Man World Repack that I showcased on that Christmas haul video a couple of weeks back, I think Klonoa might be worth a look. Next up on the list, getting a little bit darker, is Chorus. Although stylistically it's written out as Chorvs, although I don't think it's pronounced Corvs, but anyways, yeah, let's take a look. Now, I've been keeping an eye on Chorus ever since it first dropped in December 2021, but for whatever reason I just kept not taking the leap on it. But it definitely appealed to me as a space combat game, considering I spent some of the earliest years of my own gaming playing a game called Star Control on DOS with my dad, and in the years since too, there's just been a variety of ship-based combat games that I've enjoyed playing, whether we talk about really early stuff like Wing Commander, to the Star Fox series, to Forsaken on the N64, to the more recent Starlink, which I thought was a really underrated game. But for whatever reason, I just kept glossing over it, and I finally bit the bullet on it last month and figured I would finally give it a shot. In Chorus, you play as Nara, a pilot with a checkered past, and her sentient ship, oddly named Forsaken, to take down a cult called the Circle, who seeks to dominate the universe. Now that sounds like an alright setup, but man, looking at the gameplay, it just looks like it's going to be a whole lot of fun. Reviewers have pointed out that the difficulty can be a little bit uneven in spots, but overall it looks like there's going to be a solid sci-fi adventure here, and I'm definitely curious about the relationship between Nara and her AI ship because, well, I just think there's a lot of potential for some very cool storytelling there. Not to mention the navigation and combat looks fast and responsive, which is exactly what I look for in a game of this type. And provided performance holds up well on the deck, I think this just might end up being a hidden gem of sorts, because I just don't hear a lot of people talking about it, but I guess I'll just have to see for myself. Next up, let's get into some crispy, pixelated visuals with Blade Assault. Now, while I kind of knew about the existence of some of the games on this list, Blade Assault is one that I truly had zero familiarity with, but looking at the trailer, it sure looked like the sort of game that I'd appreciate with some crispy pixel art visuals and a lot of fast-paced action. Plus, it was part of last month's Humble Choice. Blade Assault is a roguelite action platformer that also sports a sci-fi setting, where you'll be fighting against the corrupt military of Esperanza as a ragtag group of freedom fighters from the Undercity. Depending on the character you choose, you'll have a different starting weapon, and in true Rogue-Lite fashion, you'll journey forth on each run unlocking a ton of upgrades and enhancements for those weapons, and gradually inch closer to victory. I don't know a whole lot beyond that, but visually it looks to be taking some influences from sci-fi classics like Blade Runner, and some of the boss battles that I've seen in the trailers look like they're going to be pretty brutal. I'm not sure if it will aspire to the difficulty heights of something like Dead Cells, but I'm definitely intrigued to try the formula out in a more cyberpunkish setting, since it seems like a lot of roguelites that come out tend to default to a fantasy or a Dark Soulsian aesthetic. And there's nothing wrong with that or anything, I just think seeing the formula play out in a different setting would be sort of refreshing. Next up is another pixel art game, although this one is a platformer, but one with a twist because you cannot jump in the game, and that is Super Magbot. Now, Super Magbot was also included in December's Humble Bundle, and looking at the trailer, I immediately thought of a few games that I'd enjoyed previously. Disc Room, which is admittedly more of a top-down affair, and also Super Meat Boy and Celeste. All of these games require precise timing and have you dodging through a variety of hazards, but Super Magbot looks to be a little bit more playful as an E for Everyone game. But the cuteness of piloting your little robot aside, the platform challenging on offer here sure looks to be every bit as dastardly as those other games I've mentioned, because if there's one thing I've learned about cutesy-looking pixel art platformers, it's that despite appearances, they can be incredibly difficult. And much like Blade Assault, I don't necessarily think this game's going to be as hard as some of Celeste's B-sides or anything like that, but I do expect that it's going to put up a respectable challenge. But hey, if you want to check it out for yourself before you plunk down $9.99, there is a free demo available for the game if you just want to try it out before, again, plunking down some hard-earned dough for it. Also, one quick thing before we continue to this last entry, another game that came out with the Humble Bundle from December was Toym, which is the adorable sort of chill photography game that's kind of in a monochromatic setting. Now, if you remember or watched the channel for a while, you know that a few months back I actually already featured this game, and I already have it, so since I don't need it, if you would like a copy of it, it is up here if you're quick enough, so enjoy that. And finally, the last game that I grabbed that I'm excited to check out is Shadow Warrior. Much like Klonoa, this was a series that I really have no experience with. I'd heard about it before, and at this point I know it's up to multiple entries, but I just always passed on it. But this time I figured I'd roll the dice and check it out, considering that its earliest entry is a bit of a boomer shooter in its own right, since it dropped in 1997 from 3D Realms. But this isn't the 1997 version, rather this is the 2013 version, which I believe is a direct sequel to that original title from the late 90s. In the game you'll play as Lo Wang, a ninja mercenary, as you fight through hordes of demons. And apparently working your way through its various levels will lead to larger battle arenas with secrets and alternative routes as the story progresses. And in addition to the range of munitions that you would expect from a first-person shooter, you also get access to a katana for close-quarters melee combat. And the reason I grabbed this is because I figured it would be fun to explore a series that I've never tried out before, but also as an older title from 2013, I'm expecting the performance on deck is going to be rock solid and provide some really good battery life to boot. Plus I figure there haven't been very many games where I was slaying hordes of demons and didn't have an amazing time, so I'm expecting that Shadow Warrior is going to be the sort of game that provides a very video game experience, if that makes sense. And that pretty much wraps it up for the non-sale games that I grabbed earlier in December before the winter sale, or games that I just managed to snag from Humble. But hey, what about you? Have you grabbed any cool games recently? Or are you familiar with any of these games that I've outlined here and can give me any advice? If so, I would love to hear about it. As always, thank you so much for your time. Take care, and I'll see you on the next one.